Hello, and welcome to Collie Conversations, the podcast that's all about transforming your life with your Border Collie. I'm Gemma Fisher, your expert in all things collie. Whether you're dealing with reactivity, recall struggles, or just looking to understand your collie better, you've come to the right place. I'm here to help you turn those frustrating behaviours into wins with practical advice and real life solutions. If you haven't already, head over to our Facebook group to get your collie questions answered in my weekly live Q&A session. Plus, the group also has training guides, my recommended resources from the podcast, and lots of other extra support and tips for collie owners just like you. Today, we'll be discussing how to make sure our collies are in the best physical health they can be in order to get the best out of them. So grab a cup of tea and get ready to take some notes. Let's get started. So many behaviour issues, like reactivity or any sort of aggression that we might see from our dogs, stem from underlying physical discomfort. And we often sort of poo-poo that a little bit. And I think that's a lot to do with the fact that, our Border Collies are working dogs. So, they are not the sort of dogs who are going to say, oh, I've got a baddie on my paw, I can't go out for a walk. They're not those dogs. They wouldn't have done that on the farms that they lived on. So they're not going to do that in our homes either. But the first place any good trainer or behaviourist will start is with a vet check. Okay. And in fact, if they are looking at the dog through either like video, like I often do through online consults, or they're with the dog in person, they may also look at how the dog is moving. How the dog sits is important, and how the dog lies down, whether or not the dog has their weight underneath them or is kind of tipped off to one side. Often you see, it's what I think of, it's what my dogs would call a settle position when I ask them to do a settle, when their hips sort of flop underneath them. If I was seeing that in my dogs when we were just doing an ordinary training session and they hadn't done very much work, I'd be a bit worried about that. So that would be something that I would definitely get checked out. So often when we take our dogs into our local vets, I think of them very much as GPs, and GPs are wonderful. So they can diagnose all sorts of things. But in terms of physical health, in the same way that you or I, if we went along to our doctor, what they would get us to do is they'd recommend, that we were referred to a physiotherapist or, some sort of orthopedic specialist if we're going down that route. So it's important to make sure that the advice that we're getting, that we don't rule out pain too quickly, because it might be that a specialist needs to look at them. And indeed, like some vets, some dogs don't like being checked over by vets. So because of how tough Border Collies are, they sometimes won't show obvious signs of pain. And if it's not obvious, and also the dog doesn't like to be touched or handled very well, your vet might not be in a very good place to be able to say, whether or not the dog is in pain or not. And something to bear in mind as well is that adrenaline is a great painkiller. Really, really good. I can testify to this myself as a hockey player, that you can take a bump, but you're running around and you're having fun. Border Collies are so like this, and one of the downsides of adrenaline being such a good painkiller is that if the dog is uncomfortable or if the dog is in pain, then sometimes they'll really ramp up their excitement levels to be able to release that adrenaline to help them feel more comfortable. But then the issue you've got there is that when there's a lot of adrenaline in the system, you also get cotton wool ears. And the dog can't always listen to the cues that you might think that they're able to do. This is something that I find with Impact, my working Cocker Spaniel. She has terribly deformed front feet, poor little lamb. And one of the first signs I know that her feet are getting bad again is that when she is racing around the woods after the dogs, she will start ignoring my recall cue. Plus, she'll be much more screamy. You know how like some dogs like to scream and run along at the same time? When she's particularly screamy, if I check her pads after the walk, I often see that her pads are actually quite sore. Does she at any point come to me and say, Mum, I'm a bit sore, I think I need to go back? She doesn't do any of that. She just jacks up on more adrenaline. So that's something that's really important to bear in mind about our working dogs. Now, you might be wondering, well, okay, I have some behavior issues that might be related to that, but how can I possibly know? Let's say I don't have a behaviorist help and I don't know where to go for, to get started. Well, what I would be looking at to start with is small changes in movement or posture. And videoing in slow motion can be a really brilliant way to assess dogs, particularly those dogs that don't like to be examined in veterinary consult rooms. Okay. One of the exercises that I often set my online students is something I learned from one of my Tellington Touch friends. And it's called a traffic light zone sheet. And it's essentially a sheet where you have the left-hand side of the dog and the right-hand side of the dog. And then you take out your colouring in pencils or your colouring in crayons, and you have a red, an orange, and a green. And the green is touch that the dog enjoys. Okay, so when you touch the dog on that area, Summer, one of my Border Collies, if you're stroking her on her head and you stop, she will look to reinitiate that contact. She will look to like get your hand stroking again because she enjoys that touch. So that would be green on her head because she's saying, I enjoy that. Amber would be something where the dog lets you do it, but they don't look to reinitiate that contact afterwards, that they're tolerating you doing it, but it's not something that they're particularly like, yeah, please, do that again. That it's not that. And then red, if you have a dog that has red lines on your sheet, you already know about this. They might start going very still. They might curl a lip. They might start to growl. Worst case scenario, they might look to spin around and snap or nip at you if you ignore their previous signals. Something like that, being able to take that along to a vet and say, look, I appreciate you can't touch them very much in the consult room, but here's some video of me doing this traffic light zone at home where they feel comfortable. This is what they're prepared to let me do and not do. And it gives them a little bit more information to be able to work with, to be able to help you. Now, anytime I see a change of behaviour in dogs, it always warrants a vet check, because grumpy dogs are often sore dogs, just the same as you and I. In the last week, I took, I fell over. I fell over while I was playing hockey, and I landed very badly on my knee. And it's been ever so sore. And I have been really short with everybody. I'm not sure I would admit this to the rest of my family, mind you. But I've been very short with people because it's just like it's in the background all of the time. It's just a bit sore. So yeah, if you have a grumpy dog and it's a change of behavior for them, check out that they're not sore, because it could well be that something's uncomfortable. And unlike me, they can't tell you which bit is particularly sore. Now, excessive nipping or biting is often put down to sort of frustration or just being a Border Collie. But actually, that can be caused by physical discomfort as well. Now, young Border Collies are often, and I describe them myself as land sharks. It's kind of a term that we use. But sometimes the amount of nipping goes beyond normal puppyhood discomfort. So we need to balance what is, the dog being able to settle down, maybe after we've given them something cold to chew on. If they're given lots of chewing materials, like, can they settle down, versus when they really they're flying at you and they really don't seem to be able to control it. We need to look at both their routine to make sure that they're getting enough rest, because sometimes that could be a piece of it too. But also, if it's going beyond that, is there some physical discomfort that we need to check out as well? The pain from teething can cause jaw pain, which, as you may know yourself, I certainly do, that it can lead to headaches and just a general tightness in the head and neck area. Added to that, when you're a dog, you have a collar and lead attached, and now somebody's pulling at your, at your neck. That can potentially be very, very uncomfortable for them. And all of that sort of pain in the jaw, head, neck area, that can all lead to an increase in noise sensitivity as well. And again, noise sensitivity often gets put down as normal for Border Collies, but if it's excessive, I think ruling out pain is a really good thing to do, because otherwise you can do all the training in the world that you like, but it doesn't necessarily solve the underlying reason, which is the dog is uncomfortable. Now, sometimes owners will come to me and they'll say, fortunately, the dog only lashes out. They only nip and bite and jump up at me. And why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? And they're not doing that to everybody else. Well, if they're young, they might not be feeling very confident. So it's something that we do want to try and address sooner rather than later, because we don't want to get to the point where they are lashing out at other people as well, obviously, because that is a risk now of the dog potentially getting themselves into quite serious trouble. But the other thing to bear in mind is, and this is a weird sort of a compliment, is that we often lash out at our nearest and dearest if we're sore. And our dogs really are no different. They are much more likely to give you feedback that, because you're their safe place, rather than some stranger that they've met on the street. So bear that in mind. But as I say, if they're a young dog, it is worth really checking this out, because what we don't want to do is that it escalates as they go into adolescent and beyond, that then they start to go, do you know what? I'm a bit older now. I'm going to lash out at other people as well, because obviously that could get them into significant problems. Now, we've talked about how poor gut health and food intolerances can cause irritability and hyperactivity in previous podcast episodes. But one thing that I thought I would mention about that particular thing is that tummy cramps can actually make the dog's back sore as well. I had a situation where I'd taken Toddy to see our canine osteopath, brilliant man, called Matt Butcher. He's down in Devon, if you're, in the area. And he was having treatment. And Matt turned to me and he said, has Todd had a bad tummy recently? And I said, I had to think for a second, but I was like, yeah, he had. But like, how do you know? And it turns out he was a little bit stuck in his spine, which needed a bit of worked out quite easily. But it's these small details that are worth noting. Now, fortunately, that small detail hadn't led to any behaviour change in Todd that was worth noting. But these things can all add up. So if we're not paying careful attention to the small details, then some of these behaviour issues can potentially grow and become more difficult for us to deal with, not least because it knocks our confidence as we're trying to deal with them as well. Now, shadow chasing or obsessive behaviours are often linked to pain as well. Now, the behaviour, it's hard to say without being able to talk to them, but the general consensus is that behavior seems to give them something else to think about. And given that dogs, border collies, like to control things, getting obsessive about trying to control the shadows or trying to control sort of the movement of light bouncing off of things. Sometimes they can do the same thing with flies, in the summertime when there's flies maybe around the house. It kind of makes sense that if it's making them feel better, that's why they would do it. But again, people often put this kind of thing down to, well, they're just a collie, what do you expect? But it's really important to understand that happy, healthy collies don't exhibit these behaviors. So if you have a dog that is struggling with that, particularly a young dog, the sooner that you start looking at, what might be going on for them, the better. Because, of course, what we practice, we get better at. So we do have instances where older dogs are, somebody finally gets to the end of their tether and then they go, right, I need a trainer or a behaviourist help. And it's not impossible, but it is harder to change behaviours that have been going on for a long time. So particularly, as I say, if you've got a young dog, then do get things checked out. So you might be thinking, well, okay, I'm a bit nervous now. Don't be nervous. Don't panic. There's lots of dogs that are going along just fine in their life, and that they don't have behaviour issues, so we don't need to worry about them. But here's a few things that you might want to note down to look out for. So things like when they are moving from one gait to another. So if they're going from a walk to a trot or a jog to a trot, maybe going into canter or gallop, are they bunny hopping at all? Do they shift their weight oddly? Or do you see them struggle at all with balance? So if they're running around on one circle, do they find that harder than going around on another? So subtle gait changes can be early signs of musculoskeletal stuff that might then begin to affect their behavior. So we want to kind of check that out just to make sure that everything's going in the right direction. And one thing that I found personally from being a teacher of agility training is that the body awareness exercises that we do for agility training can really help us in picking up on subtle issues. It was a Rottweiler, not a Border Collie, actually. But I remember one Rottweiler coming to an agility class, and we were doing an exercise where I was asking the dog to turn around on a narrow board, ready for some dog walk training later on down the line. And the dog could turn on one circle, turning, I think, round to the right, but it could not turn around to the left. Absolutely could not. And it ended up going and being checked over by the vet. And then very unfortunately, and this is quite extreme, by the way, too, but very unfortunately, it had a spinal issue that if we hadn't sorted, it might have got to the point where actually the dog might have really ended up out on a walk somewhere and really hurt and screaming in pain. So I was really lucky this owner was very on the ball and was doing stuff with her dog so that she noticed things. Now, if you have a collie that flinches, growls, or avoids touch in certain areas, hopefully what I'm getting across is it could be more than just a grumpy mood. So the things that I would have you think about are vet's visit in the first place. If I haven't mentioned that already, vet's visit in the first place. Okay. If you have a dog that cannot be checked over by a vet safely, what I would suggest is that even if you are going to muzzle them, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get very good information from the vet about what is going on. So whilst muzzle training would be part of the picture that I would advise you on, I would also maybe go to your vet and discuss maybe the possibility of a pain trial using something like paracetamol, so a very low grade sort of painkiller. Do not use without veterinary advice. Please do not do this without veterinary advice. But this is something that if you were working with me, it might be something that I say to you, go and have a chat to your vet and let's see whether or not that might be something that we could check. Essentially what we'd be looking for is that if the behavior that we're getting improves when we're on that pain trial, then we know that we're going down the right track in terms of there's something potentially going on for the dog. Now, obviously, if it's like more complex, paracetamol might not touch something that where, you've got a more serious pain issue going on, but it's a good place to start. And again, if you are able to get video for your vet of what your dog looks like normally, that can be really helpful. But let's be specific. They don't want to see your dog necessarily just, running around in the field. The specialist vets that I go to at the Smart Clinic in Cardiff, that it's actually called Smart Clinic, if you want to go and look that up. So they have a clinic in Cardiff and also in another part of Wales, which I cannot remember. And I guess as soon as I hit stop record, I'll remember, but it'll come back to me. Swansea, that's it. So Cardiff and Swansea. One of the things that they will get me to do is walk the dog up and down in a straight line. And they'll also get me to walk the dog round in a circle, both to the left and to the right as well. Now, when we do that, they can often get quite good information about what is going on gait-wise. I do recommend, if you can, getting it done somewhere either on short grass or maybe on tarmac, where the dog is going to be walking in a normal fashion. So obviously, if they react to traffic, not by the road, but somewhere where the legs can be seen and what's happening can be seen. And as I say, going around in both the left and the right hand side as well. Now, on that basis, it may well be that a referral to somebody like a canine physiotherapist, maybe an osteopath like I've used in the past, or a massage therapist might be a good idea. And actually, lots of the lovely massage therapists I've worked with in the past, they are, I've sent a few Border Collies to them that will not let the vet check them. Will absolutely not let the vet check them. But the vet only has 10 minutes, whereas the massage therapist will normally book an appointment, certainly for the first one, for at least 45 minutes, if not 60 minutes. So the difference is that your massage therapist is potentially going to get to know your dog that much better. They're going to go more slowly because they've got more time to be able to do that. And often they get to a point where the dog trusts them to be able to do some sort of muscle check. And they will sometimes do free muscle checks as well. And they might be able to give you a pointer to be able to go back to your vet and say, look, there seems to be a bit of an issue in this area. Could you do some sort of a referral? So that's the sort of route I would look for if I was dealing with a dog who I thought was physically sore. Not even if they were presenting at that point in a behavioural way in terms of like some sort of an issue, but I'm always looking to avoid problems occurring in the first place because it's easier to avoid things happening than it is to try and fix them after the event. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. I hope this episode gave you that extra boost to make a difference to your collie's behaviour. Today's episode was sponsored by my Collie Culture Unleashed, my 6-week training programme, which the registration of the February class ends this evening as we start next Monday, the 10th of February. Collie Culture Unleashed is a supported programme, which means there are set times for enrolment. This course supports owners with collies who have problems like excessive barking around their home, lead walking issues close to traffic or on sight of other dogs, and it helps with off-lead collies who can't hear your recall cue when there's any kind of distraction. Don't forget, you can find information about this and all the resources mentioned in the Facebook group. So head over there now. Next episode, we'll be talking about the importance of training in environments where our collies feel safe and secure. So stay tuned. So until next time, stay focused on progress, not perfection. And remember, every small win counts.